Dajle, warm greetings, warm greetings, warm greetings. Welcome everyone, near and far, known and unknown, here and now and long into the future. Always so special to get together to connect with and absorb the meaning of the Dharma, to wisdom and compassion of the lineage masters and the living kind of nature of our own intelligence, to kind of really activate that, refresh that living vitality of Dharma right here, right now. Thanks for coming together to do this, with one another and with yourself and in your immediate environment. So as we've heard so many times, and it's always part of an essential kind of component, the rigorous kind of bedrock of any time we ever study or practice the Dharma, and trying to really be like living experience all the time, actually. We reactivate these three motivations that Khenpo Rinpoches and all these lineage masters have emphasized again and again. And those three are renunciation, or joy and appreciation, then Bodhichitta, heart, mind of enlightenment, and pure perception, kind of seeing pure body, pure speech, pure mind. So these three essential points bring together the three yanas, foundational Buddhism, Sutra Mahayana, Tantra Mahayana, with this very genuine kind of gratitude, kind of have a fresh, kind of wakeful appreciation of like how many amazing things that we have in our experience right now. All the things in causal history that have led to this moment for us to be here and breathe and enjoy and have our sensory things function. There's just such an infinite list, and that we have Dharma. We have a complete path to enlightenment. We have this beautiful nature. We're kind of step by step brightening that nature. Like so many reasons to be joyful, thankful, really try to turn that on. And then in addition, with Bodhichitta, we all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. It's kind of the visceral experience of all of us wandering beings, constantly trying to be happy, trying to avoid suffering. It's just kind of such a tender-hearted experience to be a wandering being, always trying to get something from outside. So with this tender-heartedness, you kind of see we're all in this same boat, all as wandering beings. So I will kind of connect to my own goodness and the goodness of others to fully awaken, fully become enlightened, and thus like really fully helpful, fully capable, fully responsive in embracing the vast nature of how many beings there are, of how vast this universe is, of how big reality is. I will become that vast, and that skillful to be with it exactly, perfectly, beautifully, elegantly, kindly. This bodhicitta motivation, try to really turn this on. Then in addition, this pure perception, this kind of heart of Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, not so much seeing everything as a prison or a world on fire or something wrong and broken and needs healing or to be fixed, some stain to be removed. Instead, seeing the kind of natural goodness, the like shining bright kind of brilliant quality of everything that's happening now, of all of our experience of this world, of each other. Try to really kind of connect with that, like rest in that courageous view, deep dignity of your own goodness kind of turn on, and like kind of connect with, and just very bravely kind of connect with that goodness in all beings, those right around you, and this environment we're in, so pure land. So we're Buddhas in a pure land. This is kind of the mantra happening, and then everything is just kind of this enlightened wakefulness or knowing quality, this kind of wisdom mind. So we try to really activate that. So we have this brief window to reflect on, contemplate the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni and Guru Rinpoche, these lineage masters, all the way to our own personal teachers, Venerable Khenpo Rinpoches, and the other great wisdom masters that we've encountered and have a personal connection with. Taking this brief time to kind of really highlight Dharma teachings that we've kind of heard and had the opportunity, the great fortune to receive and reflect on them, really kind of chew them, digest them, kind of really get a kind of more kind of squishy kind of connected experience of them and like really transform, like to really try to absorb them, to have us align with Dharma so that we're living Dharma. We're in alignment or attunement with kind of a natural system which we're already a part of. So we have this brief little window to do that together before then we'll specifically kind of manifest and relax into this living lineage wisdom ecology of the Dudjom Tersar Ngondro with Guru Rinpoche, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arhats, the great 8 Harukas and all the Dharmapalas, Dharma, Dakinis and Dakas will kind of relax and rest and do this practice together. But first we'll do kind of a little brief kind of reflection, kind of just kind of sizzle our attention to a specific little corner of Dharma. And the corner that I thought to do is actually an interesting one. Don't know where I'm going to really go with this. It's called No Trespassing. How to honor living lineage wisdom and not break it from outside or within. No trespassing. How to honor living lineage wisdom and not break it from outside or within. This kind of popped into my mind a few days ago. It's been something I've been thinking about a lot. No trespassing. It's helpful for me. I have like some Dharma teachings that I'm going to refer to and then just kind of like weave together some things. So for my mind, this is really hard. I have a really tricky wandering mind. Always kind of looking out and kind of with a kind of genuine enthusiasm and care for the Dharma. Really deep, I have deep love for Dharma. But I also have a very small, tight vision of what the Dharma is. Like to funnel through all kinds of layers of ignorance, small-mindedness, all kinds of emotional obscurations and things. So when I come to contemplate questions about kind of the lineage continuing, then my mind can get more tight, more judgy. So something that's been helpful for me is something that Eric Pema Kunzang said. And he said to me once, it was really helpful for me. This is just like a personal, he said to me in person, he said, we don't have to worry so much about other people doing things wrong or not and get preoccupied by that. I would suggest that you leave out those things and just shine. We don't have to worry so much about other people doing things wrong or not and get preoccupied by that. I would suggest that you leave out those things and just shine. That line, amongst other things he said, has really helped me. I've come back to it so many times. It's kind of like a strong point. I think this has a lot to do with preserving lineage wisdom. Just really connecting to our own goodness and just shining. Like connecting to the goodness in others and just appreciating it. Appreciating the shine of others. And just kind of basking in that. Like deeply celebrating and caring for kind of all the beauty and the kind of like unique kind of different ways that we all kind of make sense of this whole life-death thing. As a basic orientation, that's really been helpful for me. And at least helpful in the sense of as a reminder. Keep pulling my mind back when I get too concerned about some samsara thing, something going wrong. As if the Buddha nature doesn't know what's the next step, you know. Have to kind of figure it out. Our wisdom really has this knowing capacity to really trust that, connect with that first, and kind of really let that shine. It's a deep trust, and this is all about like preserving lineage. Like a point that's also been helpful for me is to distinguish between a view and then a world, or an orientation, an approach, and then actually an ecology. So in Tibetan Buddhism, we have these amazing teachings in this 9-yana system according to Nyingma school, and it's always taught as a fundamental kind of principle that these, in terms of the path, we always have a view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. These three, or these four, always come together as a harmonious whole. I will call that an ecology. It makes a world. The view is the first one, tawa, an orientation and an approach, or a worldview, a way that we orient to experience and then interpret experience, what we see, what we don't see, how much we see, how little we see, how we read it, how we make sense of it. That's a view, a worldview, not just some dry, sterile, scientific, at a distance view, but the lived experience of how all of our sense doors are operating. They're always funneled through a view or a worldview. So that's one. But then there's meditation, conduct, and fruition. There's sustaining that worldview or that view, integrating it with our daily lives, and also in our sadhana formal practice. And then the results that come from that, with having this cause and conditions set up. We have a world, and what happens with the world as it continues to be sustained. This is always a complete ecology: view, meditation, conduct, fruition. So the point here is there's a significant difference between the view and then sustaining the view and integrating the view and getting the result of being in that world space. A middle way approach is one thing, but actually stabilizing a middle way approach where we actually live it in our experience and over time develop living connections, living roots, living relationships based on a middle way view, with the texture of a middle way view that's like really permeating and saturating our experience. We're like living in a middle way world. Flash orientation, shine on view now is one thing. It's the key principal thing we do every single moment. We always turn on a view. Question is which view? In Tibetan Buddhism, the view required is a middle way view. This is for Tibetan Buddhism. Have to have the heart of a Bodhisattva. Have to have that heart mind turned on as the bedrock orientation of everything. Otherwise, everything else is wrong. The view's wrong, then naturally the meditation, conduct, and fruition are wrong. So always up to the practitioner is to check in real time right now with mindfulness, what's my view? How's my heart? How's my dignity? And then you have to sustain that. And with sustaining that, that's where we use all these different techniques, supportive conditions, skillful means to help us sustain a view, the middle way view, or a Tantra Mahayana view. And then as we do that and sustain it longer, we're integrating our usual daily activities, talking, walking, sleeping, lying, standing, all the things. And gradually that becomes an ecology, a world. How to not break a world. How to not break a middle way world. How to not break a tantric world. Principally, this begins with the view I'm holding. What world am I in? That's where kind of the responsibility and accountability of showing up in an ecology in the world always begins with me. What view am I in? Which actually means what world am I in? This is kind of a very deep point. Then there's different things that kind of popped in my mind with this. This is kind of a little bit of a random kind of assimilation of kind of like things that have touched me. Instead of like, I know a lot of people aren't really into kind of dry mechanical lists of operating manuals of the sets of 3 things and 5 things and 10 things. And in general, you know, people want to, I see this in my experience, we want to be swept away a lot more than explained. We'd rather have like a sweeping atmosphere that kind of like we can surrender to than like actually have someone explain the living mechanisms of how that works. That tends to be the true in my experience with my own mind. I'd rather hear a beautiful song than have it explained like why it works. So I'm kind of pausing all the kind of mechanistic, third person, so-called objective scientific languaging a little bit. Now I get to go with more like free flow, intuitive feeling, because that's what people ask for. Then we'll see if I can do it any good. But one thing that popped in my mind is Khenpo Rinpoche. I remember when I was here at Padma Samye Ling early on, maybe about 2004. We were in a room just over here, and it was a little room, size of about 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet, maybe 5 by 5, small little room here. And Rinpoche said to me, "Oh, do you know what at that time it had shelving things with dishes and different soak utensils and things for big feast offering ceremonies." And Khenpo Tsewang Dongyal Rinpoche said to me, "Oh, do you know what we are initially going to have this room be?" "Oh, no, I don't know, Rinpoche, what?" In the center of this room, we are going to put a giant prayer wheel, just with a chair. And then it would just be someone every day can sit here in this chair and just spin this big prayer wheel. Then he said to me, "You don't know how much I would like to just sit in this room and spin this prayer wheel." That really struck me. This is a giant 3-story Tibetan Buddhist gompa. After escaping from Tibet, after being hunted over the Himalayan mountains, the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoches with their mom, dad, 2 sisters, they made it, almost with nothing. And look what we have now. This big temple, 500-acre retreat land, upstate New York. Big temples in Florida, retreat center in Florida, temple and the kind of rural retreat in Nashville and in Tennessee, temple in Puerto Rico, monastery in Sarnath, miracle stupa in Shravasti, all these different Sangha members spread throughout the world, all these books, all these translations of so many sadhanas, all these things that Rinpoches have given us. They built this world. And the thing they'd like to do, Rinpoche would just like sit in the room, spin a prayer wheel. They're like this giant offering they've given to us. We're their Sangha. And not just us, these people, flesh and bones, but all these beings. Every time you ring a gong before teaching, inviting all the beings of the universe, anyone interested to come show up. Rinpoches are setting such a gorgeous, elegant table for us to come and just, all we have to do is show up and just respectfully, kindly, just enjoy the beautiful feast. Be in that world and relax. They're not doing these things for themselves. They're really serving beings. And they're showing us how we can do that too. How do we serve beings? And how do we get in our own ways where we kind of make it all about me? The prison of selfishness. So as 17th Karmapa refers to it, the prison of selfishness. So how can I be in this beautiful world? Well, there's this Mandala, this Vajrayana world, or just the world too. Biological world. And on. There's so many different worlds because there's so many different views. How can I be in a world gracefully, elegantly, lovingly, kindly, carefully, as a steward, a custodian, as a genuine, humble, active participant, and not break it? Really care for it however much I can. How to do that, Is a really relevant question as so many worlds come together, as we have access to so many worlds, and we can create them very quickly now too, because the mind is just creating these views all the time. Another thing that struck me is Khenpo Rinpoche recently in his winter retreat teachings from Florida, mid-January, he made a point, I think it was maybe first day, maybe third, I forget. But it struck me, and I could tell it struck the people in the room too. We saw it here at Padma and as a webcast. Rinpoche said, during people's busy lives, when they're working, they seem to really make a lot of time for Dharma practice. But oftentimes, when they retire, they also retire from Dharma. And the point was around impermanence. As we get older, closer to the point of us dying, it's really good to put a little more extra emphasis on Dharma, on love, compassion, wisdom, on kind of activating, kind of being in the quality of those natural Buddha nature kind of outreaching display. It's even more important to do that. Time is running out. Don't try to leave the world then. Leave this world, this mandala of love, compassion, and wisdom. But how can I flexibly sustain that? There's a lot of different ways to be in a world and an ecology. It's not a one-size-fits-all experience. This is not a dogmatic, doctrinal, authoritarian, overly centralized totalitarian system. Buddha Dharma is flexible. Buddha always met the view of the viewer and used whatever was available to have the viewer relax so their own internal intelligence could shine on more. Their own Buddha nature could relax and confidently, naturally kind of extend its brightness, its aperture, its connectivity. But it never forced anything. We don't want to leave the world early. That would be like breaking such an interesting thing. From His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche in a letter, he wrote, His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, you shouldn't go for teachings that move mountains, your inner kundalinis, your channels, or gain enlightenment in one lifetime immediately. Though these teachings are esoteric and powerful, are you ready for them? Being ready takes decades of practice, so you have to be sure. I know of people, quote, doing higher tantra practices for the last 15 years and gave up and just went back to hedonism. They weren't ready, it turns out. Instead of applying fundamentals, they ran for the sky and just fell down to earth. This is not the fault of the Dharma, but of our impatience, ignorance, and sometimes arrogance. The thing with Nine Jhana system of view is like these high-level views of Dzogchen and Inner Tantras, they include the more foundational lower-level views, like Four Noble Truths that Rinpoche is teaching us in the centers on Sundays. 5 aggregates, 12 links, 6 paramitas, all these bedrock Dharma teachings, bedrock meaning always important, always essential, always the fiber, the living connective tissue, the heart, the beating heart of every single practice we'll do. If we don't really put the time into like really saturating ourselves with these core root first principle, bedrock, deep level teachings of the Buddha, and just instead go for like very kind of like flashy or like kind of swept away in the movie story without actually applying the user manual intelligence. How does this actually work? Why does this work? If we just want to be swept away, and we don't actually want to use our intelligence, our prajna, to really learn how it works, why it works, what's my mind doing? Oh, my mind's changing now. Then I need to change a technique. I need to meet this technique that I received from the lineage and align it properly because that's what my view's doing right now. If we don't do that kind of bedrock, core, nutritious exercising work or play, then challenge will reveal the weakness. Challenge will reveal like our usual default mode. And it's challenging times. And we've committed to like really keep showing up for all beings. We have that heart commitment. And this is a big, long view. This is not this just going to happen this week, this life, all beings be enlightened. We might be in a view where all of a sudden we're no longer in samsaric mode, and they say like these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, when they are in this mode of inner Tantra vision, of Mahayana, or like the Tantra Mahayana Dzogchen vision, they can't even find suffering anywhere. They search through all these universes. They can't even find a single iota of suffering. If we get in that sudden realization mode, then we have so much alivening energy to be with other beings who don't have that mode. They're not turned on that way. They're not relaxed and natural that way. We'll have even more energy to be with them. Instead of just escaping into my retreat, my mantra accumulation, my Dewa Chen straight highway. Dewa Chen's not a way to get out of samsara. It's a way to actually like be more carefully and lovingly with beings in samsara. It just speeds up the process so we're not kind of causing as much trouble for ourselves and others before we can actually help them. This is not like an escape hatch. That would be breaking the ecology. It would be its own version of trespassing. So it all comes down to this view. Why am I in this? Why am I doing all this Buddhist stuff? Am I doing it to feel better? That's a genuine question. Sometimes I am. Do I just want to feel better? Am I doing it to get a better position, a better future? I'm suffering so much now, but if I do some Dharma practice, it'll make it better later, Am I doing it just so I can be out of all this trouble and mess? All this suffering, this ongoing pervasive suffering. Am I doing it because I'm right? Because I know. It's emptiness. I know this. This is what the great Manjushri told Sachin Kunga Ningpo. These are all worldly views. If I use Dharma just to feel better, or I use Dharma to have a better samsara position, or I use Dharma just to get out of samsara for myself, or I use any view to reify that view as if it's the final word, if I do a totalizing mode, these 4 graspings have to be given up by serious Dharma practitioners. This is a really strong statement from Manjushri that I really take seriously, because they create worlds. Those are all worlds. I want to be happier. That creates a world where I orient. That's my goal, and I orient towards achieving it. There's a whole view meditation conic fruition of that goal, that view. Am I doing it just to get a better rebirth, upper realm rebirth, or just to escape the cycle? Am I doing it just because I think I know? Because all these ways, they won't work. That's what Manjushri is so kindly telling us. None of these work if we're trying to do Dzogchen or Tantra. Vajrayana, they fundamentally, it's not the right view to be in that world. We won't actually be in that world. The Dzogchen, or like the pure view world. Which is a big problem, because if we think we're in that world and the decades go by, but then we actually haven't ever been in it, or maybe we were once or occasionally or when the time is right or on the beach or whatever it is. If we're not designing our experience to be resilient enough to deal with challenge, with out-of-the-box kind of ways that I can't control, then we're using Dharma to not be with life. We're trying to use the Dharma to go around life, escape life. So many communities and people and all that have talked about it, spiritual bypassing. It's not a new type of topic, spiritual materialism. But am I doing that? Just because it's an old topic, like, a 2,600-year-old topic, it doesn't mean I'm doing it. Am I doing it right now? These are like really practitioner questions. Dudjom, His Holiness Dugu Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche, he once said a few years ago on Facebook, I hope you continue your practice and dedication to whatever extent you can. Please don't become opposite of what you practice. Don't become a Dharma hippie, a teacher shopper. Nowadays, so many teacher shoppers go to every teacher, every empowerment and puja. Please don't waste life like that. Collecting Dharma experiences. He continues, our Asian people like more ritualistic pujas, sort of powerful things. We intend to do less practice. Now I would like you to divert that. Less ritualistic, more focus on practice. That's the quintessential basis of everything, what Buddha Shakyamuni and Guru Rinpoche did and what our teacher is doing for us. Please no longer forget this at all times. These great masters are really kind of like shining lights on these kind of ways that actually help us get out of trouble, like these Samye guidelines. We get into a local living ecological system. Following the guidelines of the system, actually paying attention to, listening, like what is the river doing? What is the soil made of? What are the bugs here? Like actually giving time to actually see how are the living relationships happening here? Because now I'm here in this world. How can I be with this world kindly, lovingly? The whole Boy Scout, Girl Scout, like leave it better than I found it kind of thing. His Holiness Karmapa said, you can't become a good Dharma practitioner if you aren't a good person. How can I be a good person? That's a bedrock. Shila, morality, ethics, whatever you want to call it, gentleness. Shila, Sultram. I need to first be a good, decent person. A really good person. Have kindness, It's not possible to be a good Dharma practitioner if you're not a good person. You might perform like you're put on a nice act. But when times get tough, the act, it falls away. then we really see what we've been doing, And it doesn't have to be so complicated either. How to just be with things in a kind of way. In this book, Pith Instructions from My Teachers, by James Gritz, is a compilation of different pith instructions he received from his teachers. This is a beautiful book. I've really already gotten a lot out of this book, actually. In it, he talks about it encountering His Holiness 17th Karmapa over the years, but also at one point during his first, or kind of some in 2002, on page 159, he said, the author, James Gritz, asked His Holiness 17th Karmapa Ojin Tenle Dorje, is it possible for a householder to attain enlightenment in one lifetime? And His Holiness Karmapa replied, it is not something impossible. It is said that if you practice, then you can accomplish liberation at home. So this is very much possible. The most important thing is exertion. Your diligence is your participation in whatever you practice. Dharma practice is mainly dependent on getting the point, or not. It's nothing more or less. When you get the point, you get liberation, and when you don't get the point, you miss it. So it is not that difficult. The most important thing to do is supplicate the Guru and supplicate the lineage and open your heart to receive the blessings of the Guru and the blessings of the lineage. Once you have those blessings, then attainment of enlightenment in this life is not really a difficult thing. This is so pithy. This is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. The line that struck out to me at first was, diligence is your participation in whatever you practice. How much are you willing to really be with it? In one way, it's more technically, we could think of this as like sustaining a view. How much am I really like actually willing to be in a world? Be in a world of bodhicitta. Be in a world that everything's maybe pure. Everyone's a Buddha that's around me. Maybe I'm a Buddha. Everything that's happening is just enlightened energy happening. How willing am I to participate in that, to sustain that view? That's so beautiful. And then he says it's so simple. You connect with like authentic teacher. They're like basically boundless wisdom and compassion. You yourself, your nature is boundless wisdom and compassion. And you align with them. You have developed trust where you can align and kind of really like let that mingle, their wisdom mingle with your wisdom. And in that space is the mandala, is the ecology, the living world. So the living lineage masters and your own Buddha nature come together. It's very simple actually. That's why they say Guru Yoga is the indispensable practice for Dzogchen people. Mingling your mind with the wisdom minds of your teacher and the lineage, going all the way back to the Guru Rinpoche and the Buddha. This is the essential pith practice. Brings together all the other instructions. Your own wisdom mind, mingling with the wisdom minds of really fully awakened beings with all the skills available to help your mind, your heart open up, wake up more brightly, more vividly until finally there's no more awakening to do. Just like boundless. And then what do? We actually care for ecologies. We care for our relationships. We care for ourselves. We don't keep causing trouble for ourselves. That's called renunciation. Give up the cause of suffering. We genuinely love all beings. They have Buddha nature. It's bodhicitta. We see the natural goodness of all the systems we're a part of all the time already. These ecologies are already integrative. They're already internested, interlinking, interlocking ecologies of wisdom and compassion, and of samsara ecologies too. They're already integrating. They're already communicating. They're already kind of reciprocally kind of interfacing with one another. How much are we willing to actually listen? Stick around in a spot and actually learn from the spot, learn from the ecology, be in a world, and actually like humbly, creatively, interestedly, like energetically learn from it. Be with it. Not try to game it, manipulate it, try to control it, try to make it mine, try to prove something, but actually like just be with it. Participate. Otherwise, we're trespassing in anywhere we are. We just take our view, push it on anything we are. That's always trespassing. That could be trespassing at the DMV, trespassing in a grocery shop, in a relationship. It doesn't have to be a Dharma thing. But if we come into a context where the bedrock state, wherever the bedrock view is, like say Bodhichitta, if we come into the context without Bodhichitta, we're trespassing. And then the bar raises as kind of the view gets more refined, meaning more natural, more inclusive, more comprehensive, more just kind of like naturally kind of like inclusive of reality. Then if we have to align with that, if we want to play in that space and learn from that space, there's not another option. Otherwise, we're trespassing. And the thing is, on the bedrock kind of humble reality of it, is we're, most of the time, I'm trespassing. It'd be very arrogant of me to say I always have bodhicitta on and pure perception on and all that, because then it would just be, I don't have that. So I have to know when I'm doing that, when I'm breaking something. I'm not aligning, I'm not surrendering, I'm not attuning, I'm not having my own wisdom kind of show up. I'm just covered in my little box. And I'm taking my box approach and basically banging it against life. Because it's very painful. I know it. It's really painful. And the beauty of syncing up with an ecology is the ecology is already integrative. We don't have to piece together each little part. All these systems of interdependence are already communicating with one another. They're already responding to each other. We're already in it. Our body's doing that. Our emotions are doing that. It's just we have to get less tight around one select kind of slice version of this very narrow filtered version of a view. And then we have to, instead of demanding all the world fit into my little box, I actually have to relax that, loosen that, flex that, clarify that, and be with the living ecological dynamics, inside, outside, self, other, quiet, big, gross, subtle, and actually learn from it and learn with the undulation, the movement of the dynamical systems of interdependence. And that's called the path. And it's not a one-time done. I mean, it's very involved, very participatory. Like His Holiness said, that will determine whether we can get enlightenment in a life. How much are we willing to participate? To really absorb it, be with it, be in the world. Creatively co-create the world. Not be against it or not just be flattened by it, but be with it. Show up creatively with it. The Buddhas want us to join in and help beings. They're not asking us to just sit down and shut up. They're asking our prajna to turn on, our bodhicitta to turn on, our creative talents to turn on. And we stop kind of closing ourselves with our limitations and obscurations. We just kind of try to put that stuff down. This burden is not necessary. We keep doing this to ourselves. And Buddhas are so kind. And then the practical reality of actually kind of having this flexibility of mind, this middle way view that's being sustained, is we actually have to grow it somewhere. We can't just keep moving between ecologies, between worlds. It's called wandering, drowa, sentient wandering. We actually have to root it somewhere. Otherwise, we're just like McDonald's going everywhere, or Home Depot, or pick a thing that's like has so much power it can basically go anywhere it wants, bulldoze the ecology, and set up shop however it wants. This is not living lineage anything. It's not ecologically sustainable. It's basically we're taking power and breaking anything we want to, oftentimes very recklessly. And we can do that. It doesn't have to be some big transnational corporate thing. We can do that just making everyone have to agree with my story, my truth, my feelings. That breaks it the same way. We can do the exclusivist thing and say, only this way of Buddhism is correct. I'm the purest Buddhist. That'll break all the other versions of Buddhism. We can do it in some fundamentalist version of Buddhism, say you have to be Buddhist in order to get enlightenment. That'll break a lot of Buddhism too. There's a lot of ways to break this thing. There's a lot of ways to actually not be flexible enough and hold a middle way view. These are called extreme views. There's all these systematized things, very detailed teachings we can study by the Buddha to show all these ways of emptiness functions that we're kind of not allowing for because our view is too tight. And if we refuse to study it, and instead we want a pith instruction that sweeps us away, and somehow magically, this whole magic pill thing, somehow we can have a blind faith, theistic, swept away by the blessings. The Buddha never taught that. That's theism. How do we have our own wisdom mind connect with other wisdom minds in a wisdom mandala where we're all highly participatory and we're learning and listening and flowing with each other? It's not a surrendering, squash yourself and let just all the power of something flood over you as if you're like a nobody and you don't matter. Each of us matters. We all have Buddha nature. Every moment is so critically important to use bodhicitta to uplift. So then as a final kind of plea to not have Buddhism become a new franchise, which Buddhism, there's so many Buddhisms. And even in authentic lineage Buddhism, Jnana system, there's so many Buddhisms. It's all view dependent. Then in this book, Poison is Medicine, which my wife Amma printed out because she liked it so much. It's a free ebook download by Dzogchen Khenpo Rinpoche. On page 81, there's a section on the two truths. This is so interesting. This is really related to our topic. Dzogchen Khenpo Rinpoche says, it's like mid-book, This may be why so many Western people appear to value the ultimate truth more highly than the relative. Buddhists don't make that distinction. It's not how Buddhists think. The Dharma neither looks down on the relative truth nor up to the ultimate truth. Not because they're equally important, but because neither exists. Both are mere tools. The survival of the Buddha Dharma not only depends on a thorough understanding of the relative truth and the ultimate truth, perhaps ultimate truth or absolute truth is better translation, but it also depends on the recognition that the point of distinguishing relative from absolute is an educational tool, not a reality. I'm skipping ahead. To a Western mind, relative truth can sound like an allegory or a parable that was made up to illustrate a point, whereas absolute truth usually sounds like the real thing. But as the Buddha himself explained, both the relative and the ultimate are simply made-up stories. Go ahead, 85. Buddha Dharma's built-in flexibility is one of its greatest strengths. It would be such a shame if Buddha Dharma were concretized to such a degree that it became just another franchise. All its individually crafted, tailor-made paths would have to be dropped in favor of predetermined formulas, lists of rules, and an unbending curriculum of strictly regimented, skillful means. With the contents of the path set in stone, Buddhism would become a kind of spiritual Starbucks. No matter where in the world you buy your Starbucks coffee, you know exactly what you will get. The taste never deviates. If you ordered a Starbucks caramel cocoa cluster frappuccino blended coffee in Gangtok, it will taste exactly the same as it does in Guadalajara. Starbucks coffee is the safest of safe bets, which is exactly how I would define the franchise mentality. The safest of safe bets. But how does making safe bets help us on a spiritual path? And how safe can any of us really be? Buddhism must stay true to its uniquely versatile approach, and that means Buddhist teachers must have the freedom to tailor a student's path to suit the student's needs. It has to be a living ecology between teacher and student, between Sangha. The Dharma has to be alive. It's naturally versatile and flexible. If it's Tantra Mahayana, it's the middle way. If it's Bodhisattvayana, it's the middle way. So we have to always engage with a light touch and awe and wonder. We're in a living ecology, and we can learn from it so much. It's not just that the ecology has to learn from me. And we're always part of larger systems, whether we see it or not. The world we're in is always larger than us. So we have to be with it. We don't have to enforce it or control it. We have to learn to be with it. So all these ways are kind of ways of participating with instead of trying to push against or lock up or fix or franchise or otherwise kind of break living ecologies. And the Buddha Dharma is no different. The Buddha Dharma is just much more fragile because it actively involves all these living views of living minds, living hearts. It requires the active, ongoing participation of each mind to like intentionally be in a certain view. That's the kind of ongoing challenge for Buddha Dharma practitioners. And then in that view, in that world, with other beings, sharing this view, trying to co-create a world together, be in a mandala, and kind of use the juicy kind of messiness of human experience and all our obscurations and emotionals and ups and downs and moods and all the things. Try to really use that as a way to kind of like encourage and brighten our bodhicitta, our connections. And in one way, our surrendering to the wisdom mind of ourselves and our teachers. We need to surrender our egoic, I'm the most important person in the room habit. Surrender to the wisdom mind that doesn't make preferences like that, and it doesn't see absolute truth as some other thing. And it doesn't say the relative is just, who cares? Absolute is this other sure thing, and the relative, all these relations and ecological kind of inflows, outflows, ups and downs, soil composition things, they don't really matter because in the end it's just all just relative truth. Actual Buddhas don't do that. They don't prefer one story over another. They're with the ongoing story that they're already a part of, and never forget it's always a part of a much larger story, and it's always made up of infinite sub-stories, always so flexible. So that's kind of my one way, long, kind of winded, little ranting, kind of highlighting, kind of ping-ponging between Buddhist points of these really great, trustworthy, amazingly kind of authentic lineage masters. We can rely on their words. And the more we investigate their words, their teachings, their instructions, their guidance, their atmosphere that they create, the more we'll actually see that it actually is a living wisdom mind. And how will we see that? We'll actually have our own wisdom mind turn on. And it'll be able to resonate more with other wisdom mind, wisdom heart. We'll kind of really be so thankful we're a part of such an amazing living mandala. And then we'll pray, like each of us, that we can keep this connection forever. Like keep caring for this connection and honoring kind of all the deep, juicy relational kind of like networks and kind of mutual bonds, and co-creative agreements, and kind of just loving kind of like connections and understandings we have with each other to like really have this be the most kind of nutritious, kind of flexible, appropriately flexible kind of environment and set of ecologies for all the beings we come across to kind of recognize their bodhicitta and love them and have compassion for them. Like skillfully, kind of kindly engage with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A quick final little wrap up. I really love you all. I mean, honestly. I'm like really so concerned, like how can we all keep coming together, stay on the path, support each other. It's such a big, long, lovely view for all beings. We're committing for all beings, whatever it takes, and to like learn the skills and the flexibility and the attunement, the appropriateness, the sensitivity, to really align like what's available here, what's going on here, to listen and like slow down, kind of line up with the pace of a living circumstance. I mean, that's really kind of where this inquiry is coming from. Like, how do we really do that? How can we really be with these living ecologies? Because it's really the swift path. Instead of building something one by one, I mean, there's just all these ecologies of practice, of study, of these wisdom mandalas, they're already happening. And they're already synced up with each other. And they're infolding and inter-enfolding, like here and throughout space. And if we kind of like let ourselves get buoyed up by that wave, that surge of all these dynamic kind of this dynamic relationality of these ecologies, of these mandalas, then all of a sudden we can accomplish all these things at once. We can just really go with the kind of surging kind of flow of all these lineage masters. They've kind of already done this, revealed this, and the kind of these natural systems are the way they are. It's a swift path, but then when things come up for us, sticking points where our mind kind of locks up, we get scared, we get tight, certain kind of subtle things surface, and kind of we close off or numb out or escape or I mean, just all the ways that we can basically try to escape experience, that we need to also know some of the nuts and bolts of Dharma, so that we don't always just have to kind of like rely on being swept away and kind of up-leveled by an atmosphere, but like When that freshness kind of like dims, when that kind of we get flat, when we get in these lulls, which are natural parts of systems, like to have these kind of low level, low energy times where we kind of just restructure ourselves, then how do I know Dharma well enough to kind of reinvigorate that fresh, connected, immersive experience of being with the Dharma? And that's very clearly emphasized in Vajrayana practice. It's why Vajra Pride is so important. To let ourselves really confidently surrender to, or like clearly see that this is a wisdom mandala, we are an enlightened being, or kind of according to the very specific ecological patternings of that mandala, according to that set of sadhana instructions. We can like line up with that set of instructions with great confidence, and that just means we can really carefully, powerfully be in that world and not bounce. We're learning to actually keep showing up in that living ecology of a sadhana practice, for example. And then all of a sudden, like great realization and great kind of heart opening, mind clarifying can happen really quickly, because those wisdom mandalas are already happening both inside ourselves and around us and with others, and we can kind of use that mutual kind of benefit to like serve beings more fully, like right now. So it's really kind of a gesture of love, and also kind of a kindness to myself to remind, this is not the first time someone's had to figure this stuff out, or these worlds already are there. It's more a question of us kind of clearly tuning into them and kind of like carefully, like intelligently lining up with them, and maintaining that living kind of vivid connection with them as we continue in a really paced, rhythmic way on the path for the benefit of all beings. So, thank you.
Thank you.